Morning, folks. Get that adjusted. Sorry about the lighting today. It's been gray, miserable, rainy outside for the last couple of days. And I use natural lighting for these videos, so for now, you're just gonna have to deal with me a little bit distorted here. But that's okay. We're not here for what I look like. We're here for the stories. Welcome back to the channel, folks. I'm your host, Jesse. Jesse's Occupational Awareness Show is what you're looking at right now. And we're going to continue talking about some prison stories about perceivably good inmates that went bad and made the day kind of shitty from there. Now, before we get into this one, I want to thank all my loyal viewers for showing me all the love that you did over this last week. In the last week, I've been called everything from a fat piece of trash. Okay, I get the piece of trash part. I'll own that, but fat? I guess the camera adds a little bit. Bitch, I'm 206 pounds and my waist size is 36 in pants and shorts. So, yeah, okay, dude, whatever. I've been called a liar. Okay, my stories are fake. Okay, a racist. There's that. And I should take everything down. So, wow, just appreciate everyone. Thanks for all the love that you're showing me. You got to get you a thick skin when you're in corrections and when you try to do these videos for people. Everyone's going to be a critic. But for that, I also get a lot of, hey, you made my weekends. Thanks for the video. Thanks for the education. So we're just going to keep on keeping on. Trolls, keep trolling. I love every single one of you. So let's get into today's topic. All right, little backstory. If you look back in my archives, one of the earlier videos that I did talked about when I was on OJT, I supervised an inmate that was responsible for entering the work requests in that would dispatch the maintenance supervisors when things needed to be fixed around the unit. Okay, and I was kind of curious about the guy. I was new, so I looked up his crime. I Google searched his name. I'm not going to say what his name was, versus the state of Texas, and the crime came up. And at the time, being a new guy, I was so appalled, so disturbed by that, I never looked up another inmate's personal information. They told us in the academy, if you have to take an inmate out on transport, say they're going from this unit to the Jester unit, the hospital, Galveston, such and such, they have their travel card. Travel card has all their information, their brief synopsis of the crime they committed, detailed description of it. They said in the academy, don't read those travel cards. You're going to look at them differently. You just need to see them as an individual in white. Okay, sorry if that makes me racist. That's their clothing. God, that's funny. Call someone by what their race is and it makes you a racist. Okay, cool, good enough. You just need to see them in their white clothing. And don't try not to think about what they did in the past. Just treat them as inmates, firm, fair, consistent. So because that was so disturbing to me, I never looked up another inmate. Well, I hadn't seen that guy in a little over a year. I remember it because this specific time we were on lockdown. Lockdown usually took place during the summertime. Inmates absolutely hated it. It was the worst time at Styles to be an inmate for the annual lockdown. For about 7 days, give or take ish, all offender movement stopped, all classes were suspended, chow hall shut down, everything. The unit focused on just straight up cell searches, inmate pat down, and maintenance discrepancies. All right. Overtime was authorized. Typically, if you worked overtime, instead of getting paid, you got compensatory time, comp time. This time, overtime was authorized. So you basically had day and night shift working simultaneously for about 7 days. And it was absolute motherfucking chaos. Just COs everywhere, pulling inmates out of cells, trash in the place, just throwing shit at everything that they weren't supposed to have. It got tossed. Okay, something as simple as they take a plastic hot sauce bottle, all right, and they break the top of it off, and they could fit that over the sink. This made a nozzle. The sinks were weird. The spout was facing up, and the water came up and down. Well, sometimes it would be so horrible it just kind of trickled down. So they had a way that they could make a little faucet out of it. Okay, that fits the definition of contraband. Anything that's been altered from its original intended use, contraband. Toss it. You had to do what you had to do when you did those cell searches. Pause for hydration. So, I don't know how it was in general population, Gen Pop, because I was a SEG boss. But I know working SEG at lockdown, man, it was miserable. All right. Instead of serving the hot trays, we fed them sack lunches, called it Johnny's. White paper bag. For breakfast, they'd get 2 hard-boiled eggs. Lunch, they'd get 2 kind of sandwiches. It may be some kind of pink mystery, what we used to call sweat meat. Meat just sweats. Take ham, set it out on the counter, wait a little bit. It's going to get nice and juicy. Now, sweat meat. I think it was some kind of pastrami version. I don't know. It was that. Or PB&J. Typically, it was PB&J. All right. Lock yourself down in your house. Pick a room, stay in a room, and eat nothing but peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and ham sandwiches for about 7 days. You're probably going to be a little pissed off too. I know I would. And these guys are no different. Okay. The only other things that would, and commissary. Commissary shut down, everything. The only really operations that continued on as normal, the pill nurse would still pass out her dopes, and maintenance. Maintenance is really the only thing that would go on. So any other kind of CO that stood some other weird watch, secretary wearing gray kind of thing, everyone was on pat down. All right. It got a little bit difficult in SEG because SEG was pretty rigorously controlled. There was only supposed to be 1 inmate out at a time. When an inmate was out on a tier, that was it. You couldn't pull him out, put him against the wall, grab another one, and walk with an inmate in each hand. You couldn't do that. It had to be a 1-for-1 kind of deal. When one inmate was out of the cell, there was nobody else moving. The exception to that, the only exception to that was if you had utility bosses, which was rare for us to have enough of them. If you had utility bosses who were moving guys out to take them to the infirmary, the barber, typically you only got 1 inmate moving at a time. In SEG, it was absolute motherfucking chaos. Okay? You'd have a group of about 8 or 10 individuals come in, no stab vests. All right, this was a time where policy was violated. You weren't supposed to be on the tiers unless you had a stab vest on, post order. Well, whatever. We can violate those whenever we want to. So these guys would come in, and they all had their own individual beam tools, and here we go. My focus was supposed to be on my floor rover. If I was working the Picket, my focus was on the rover. When that CO got to the door, we were ready to roll the door, do business, and go from there. These shakedown bosses, as he called them, they weren't there to move inmates and take them into the day rooms. They were strictly there for the cell searches and for just the chaos. They'd come in, they wouldn't even acknowledge us. They'd come in, they'd go to a cell, tell the inmate turn around, cuff up. If he didn't, okay, we'll handle that on TDC terms. Usually they would turn around and cuff up. All right, at least in the cases that I saw. I don't know how it was in the other pods. They turn around, cuff up, they'd pull him out, and one officer would hold him against the wall. An inmate was given 1 warning. Inmate, don't come off the wall. If you do, that's assault. That was their 1 warning. The other officers would go inside the cell and they'd start shaking it down. Shit would get thrown out on the tiers, collected up, everything he wasn't supposed to have, it just got thrown out. This is where a lot of inmate assaults came from. Okay, they give the inmate his warning, and inmate, he's got his face pressed up against the wall. And inmate just he just moves his head like a human being does. And boss would be like, assault, assault, assault. And he'd take him and just bang him again. Now, the inmate had his hands cuffed behind his back. He'd bang his head against the wall, take him down to the ground. The other officers that were patting down, they'd pile on top. We call it the TDC gray pile. They just pile up on top, and here we go. They're putting the boots to him. This happened a lot. All right. It was what it was. I watched a lot of guys get beat up that week, and I'm sorry, because there was nothing I could do about it. It was pretty bad. So I'm working the picket in this particular incident. There was some maintenance that needed to be done in the pod I was in. I was working Charlie pod. There were only two of us. I was in the picket, and there was a floor boss who was roaming. One of the stairs going up to the second deck was damaged. I think when some of the shakedown bosses were coming in and they were checking everything, they're supposed to, shake the stairs for their integrity. And I think one of them, it broke from that. It was kind of hanging on by its hinges. You didn't want to step on it, nonetheless. And there was an inmate who was getting brought down from one of the tiers. He stepped on it, slips, falls. Officer tries to catch him. He can't. Inmate hits the ground, busts his face all up. All right. Per TDC policy, the officer was at fault at that point. You're in control of that inmate. Anything that happens to him, that's on the officer. So you get a case wrote up on him, and it went from there. So maintenance got dispatched out. They were coming to fix it. I hear the bang on the door. I look back behind me, and I see a couple of inmates in white. They had their little white caps on. That's usually the sign of maintenance workers. And buzz the door, let them in. There were three of them that came in. One walking by himself, two pushing a cart. They had their maintenance supervisor behind them. Maintenance supervisors typically wore polo shirt, some kind of button-down shirt, blue jeans. They didn't wear a uniform. And they were there to supervise the inmates that did the work. They didn't do the work themselves on many occasions. I'll get to that. They were there to supervise the worker inmates. I saw this guy that I had seen that day that I was working in the office. When I was supervising him, looked up his case, never told him I did that. I'm sure he doesn't know unless he watches these videos, which would be pretty hard because he ain't never getting out of TDC. He comes in, looks up at me, nods his head. I nod my head back to him. It wasn't hard to talk to each other from the picket. It had open slots. They were probably about that much wide enough you could stick your arm through, but you couldn't crawl through it. You couldn't get from the outside, you couldn't get in. From the inside, you couldn't get out. He walks by, nodded, sticks his face in. Hey, boss, hey, how long you been here, man? Ever since I got off OJT. All right, man, good to see you. Went on. That was it. Just a nice little interaction. Cool. They pushed the cart over. They start, and maintenance supervisor, they didn't tell you what they were there for. They most of the time they didn't give a shit. So they start working on the stairs. Okay, cool. I had a problem with the lock panel there in the picket. I can't really paint a very good picture other than picture a big metal panel with square red buttons. They were raised in rows of, I don't remember how many rows they were, but basically there were 84 buttons for 84 cells. When you press it, you'd hear a little click, and the button would highlight red. The officer on the floor, there was a lock box down beside where the door was. They had to push their button as well. If you pushed one or the other, the door wouldn't open. You had 5 seconds from the time that either one of us pushed the button to push it. The circuit would complete, the solenoid would click, the door would pop to the side, and then you could slide it, what we call roll the door. Back in the days when they actually used a rolling mechanism to pull the old cell doors open and closed. You'd holler, you'd reach on the floor, you'd reach up, push the button, roll 22! Picket boss would hear, most of the time. They'd press their button, and it would work from that. Well, on this particular day, I don't remember exactly which cell it is, I went to press the button, and the button pressed right through the panel. Pressed all the way through. So, boss yells again, roll whatever door it was, we'll call it 22, roll 22! And I start banging on the glass. Picket boss looks back at me, and I'm like, hands up, put my face down. "The button's broke!" Yelled out as loud as I could. He looks back and says, "The button's broke! I can't open the door!" Yelling just as loud as I can. Does his head like that, tells the inmate something. Inmate starts yelling and hollering at him. Now he's pissed because he can't take him out. How we doing on time here? Okay, that's good. Sorry about that. It's hard to see because I keep the lighting down so it doesn't reflect off my glasses here. Now the inmate's yelling and hollering at him because he can't get it fixed. Can't get the door open. Okay. You can do it manually. There was a rod at the end of each one of the tiers. There was a box mounted on the wall. The supervisor had the key to it. You can call the supervisor. This is if, say, there was a power outage or something, and inmate needed to be extracted, or some shit like that happened in the picket there and you couldn't get it open electronically. Supervisor could come and open that box, and there was a metal rod inside it. It was about, I don't know, maybe a foot or so long. It had a point on the end of it. And up at the top of the door, where the door would slide on its hinge, you could jam it into the mechanism up there, feel around. It was kind of like first aid trying to find the G-spot most of the time. You might find it, you might not. You stick that rod in and move it around, and when you found the mechanism and you put resistance to it, it would manually release the door. And then you could slide it open like normal, take control of the inmate, and then slide the door back. Problem is, it took forever to get them damn doors open with that lock rod. Nobody liked having to use that thing. We had no formal training on it. I'm pretty sure it was just supposed to be used for emergencies by the actual lockpick supervisor, but you had to do what you had to do when you were in there. So we put the we put the radio out to LT. LT comes, he opens up the box, gets it to the guy, puts in a call to dispatch the maintenance guy. And it took a little while. I don't remember exactly how long. Maintenance guy and his group of inmates, they show up. It was an old guy. I think he was a captain previously at TDC, like started back in the 70s, retired after, I don't know, 30, 40 years, came back to work. That happens a lot at TDC. Guys will retire, wait 60 days, come back to work, collect retired pay, and collect CO pay. All right, that's what this guy was doing. He'd retired as a supervisor. Now he was a maintenance supervisor. So he's doing pretty good pay-wise. I had interactions with the guy before, not personally, but he had been in my pods before, and just loud. You know that guy, kind of like me, that just won't shut up talking and just telling stories and just loud, boisterous, and get inmates all stirred up and fired up? That was this guy. Nobody likes seeing this son of a bitch show up. So, we got lockdown going on. All right. Guys are pulling guys out of the cells left and right. And we got maintenance work going on the stairs. So I got a lot going on. All right. This guy gets dispatched. He comes into place, starts yelling out, "Which one of the locks is broken? Which lock is broken? Which door is it?" And I bang on the glass, get his attention. Hey, it's in here. It's in the picket. He's like, "Oh, shit. All y'all get back. I got to get in here now." What he was talking about, inmates were not allowed in the pickets, ever. There was a situation that took place in 2000, the Texas 7 guys, I don't know how they did it. They got uniforms. I'm going to tell the story wrong. Look it up for yourself. Basically, they got uniforms, disguised themselves as officers, got inside the picket. I think they killed the boss that worked the picket and let themselves out. There were 7 individuals. They escaped from the prison. There was a manhunt, and it changed policies about uniform control, who's allowed in and out of the pickets, how the doors are controlled. It was an eye-opener for it. So his workers couldn't come in the picket and do anything. It had to be him. So he had to get his guys out of the way. There couldn't be any trustees around when the picket door opened. I opened the door, and he comes in, and he just, "All right, what's going on in here? What's fucked up with this?" And I told him, I went to push the button here, and the button fell through. He looks at it, looks at me, looks back at me. Well, you push her right through the panel. I work here 40 years. I ain't never seen nothing like this before. You did this yourself. It's basically saying that I purposely did that. Like I broke the thing. Okay. Words were exchanged, and basically he threatened me with a write-up. He's going to write me up for misconduct. Like, okay, cool, got that. While he's working on it, obviously I couldn't keep everything that was going around. The trustee worker, I told you about earlier that I supervised, he had come over to the picket and had his face not in where the slot is, but pretty close to it, and yelled out in there, hey, lock boss, hey, cap. Guy glances up. He had opened up the panel, had it lifted up. He's holding it with one hand, and he's working on the mechanism underneath where the panel would close down. He's got that up. He looks up. Hey, I saw him. He did that. He pushed his hand right through the panel. He's like, fuck this thing, man. I'm shutting this thing all down. I want none of these guys getting out of here. He looks at me. He's like, I told you fucked this thing up yourself. You catching a case on this one. I looked at him. I was like, motherfucker, get done working in this shit and get off my picket. And the fight was damn near on from there. Man, he dropped the panel back down. Hey, you ain't got nothing to say to me. At that point, I don't even remember what we were saying. We're in the picket, yelling, hollering at each other, to the point that the CO workers that were pulling guys out, they were looking back at us. I couldn't see him at the time because I had old fat nasty dude in my face. But I talked to a couple of them after I was done with the situation, and they said they could hear us in there, and they were watching, and it just looked like, an old fat dude and a CO just rubbing chests, screaming at each other. It was pretty ugly. So much to the point it happened so fast, I don't remember all that we said. I do know that the guy, he didn't fix the thing. He got to the door. He had his own set of keys to get in and out. He was a lock guy. Let himself out, got his guys and left. Buttons not fixed. Okay. I'm just, heart's racing, sweat on my face, kind of like you do when you get into a nasty altercation with somebody. And I kind of look around, and picket boss, he's standing by the door. He's doing one of these with his hand as a symbol. Come on, roll the door. I go back, just kind of go on like normal. I remember I looked over by the stairs, and inmate, he's still looking at me. The other two they're working, supervisor just standing there with a card. Looks at me, takes that hat off, tips it, puts it back on, looks back, had this little shit-eating grin on his face, and goes back to work. I was like, this little son of a bitch. So what happened later on from that, the lock supervisor, he tried to file charges on me for destruction of state property. The inmate wrote an I-60, Snitch form on me that I had damaged the equipment as well. I had to have a sit down with Lieutenant Raymond, Captain Nord, Fat Ass Jones, and basically explain the situation. They pulled the tapes from there was a camera in the picket. They pulled the tapes from it, and all you could see on it was me pressing and it going right through. So I was exonerated of any charges. Just didn't stop the fact that the situation happened, and yeah, it got pretty ugly. But hey, just a normal day, TDCJ, man. That's how it goes. That's the shit they don't teach you in the academy. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed this story. Keep on tracking with me. Got a lot more coming up for you guys. I'm going to try to stick to this schedule. Everyone be safe. Take care of yourselves. I'll see everyone in the next video.